Thank you for standing by, and welcome to the Minden Dialogue Committee conference call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. David Gray, you may begin your conference.
Thank you, Tony. We appreciate that introduction. And so, Christy, let me turn it over to you.
Great. So this is Christy Parker-Selico and Doug Sarno's on the phone. We serve as the facilitators for the group, and as I believe most folks on the dialogue know, but perhaps others don't that are listening in, Doug and I were asked to serve as facilitators actually by some participants in the group. In this particular case, we are being paid by EPA, but we very much view that we work for the group and, frankly, can be fired by the group. So our job is to move this along as efficiently as possible. And frankly, the timeline's more than slightly challenging. With that, David, I'm going to ask you, I can see a long list of names on the left-hand side of who's on the webinar. Is there a way to get a list of who's on the call easily or not?
No, there is not.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is, for folks that are not on the webinar, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself so we know who else is on the call. And folks that are on the webinar, I'm going to assume you're on the call. So go ahead and announce yourselves.
This is John Stanley, Webster Parish Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness.
Great. Thank you, John.
Wilma Subra, Louisiana Environmental Action Network.
Thank you, Wilma.
Bob Flanoy, environmental toxicologist.
Thank you, Bob. Hearing silence, then I'm going to roll ahead. For folks that are not able to speak because you're a member of the public and not a dialogue member, we will try to leave time for questions at the end. But, you know, we're going to do our best. We've got a lot of stuff to get through today. I'm going to flip the agenda order a little bit just so folks know. I've been told it might be more productive, and I agree with this, to first discuss some of that criteria and then go to some of the goals. And part of the reason is some of the folks that were having troubles with the goals can't be on until later. So I'm hoping that might help the situation there. Let's begin, though, first with some key updates. And Doug Sarno, my colleague, I'm going to ask you to first give a quick update on what happened with the technology working group and where we're at there for folks that weren't able to be on or aren't on the technical working group. Doug, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thanks, Christy, and welcome, everybody. I just want to give a very brief update on where things are with the technical work group and explain a little bit about what the technical work group will be doing. There is a summary of key results that we just produced from yesterday's call. It will be posted to the website. Just remember, everything will be posted to the website, so you'll see the agenda from yesterday. We'll put the results up there. If you have any trouble with getting access to or getting information from that site at the EPA, send it around the address, and we can send it around again, make sure everybody has it. Please just contact us, and we'll make sure you can get that information. I'm not going to go through what we did yesterday in excruciating detail, but I just want to give everybody kind of a sense of where that committee is, what the committee is doing, and how it's going to move forward. The basic purpose of the technical work group is the fact that if you think about the process we're on right now, most dialogues like this meet once or twice a month. We're meeting 2 or 3 times a week over the next month. So we're moving at rocket speed, and we need to really work hard to get our information together with regard to all of the technologies we're going to be looking at. And so the technology work group, the main purpose is to assemble the information around the different technologies so that we can do our evaluation. And so that requires us to take the criteria, turn it into ways to array information around the technologies we're going to be looking at, put that into tables or some sort of format that allows people to look at that. We need to get basic descriptions of every technology we're going to be looking at so we can compare apples and apples, make sure we have all the right information for each of the technologies that are out there. And so this is the start of the work we began yesterday, which is to just sort of organize ourselves around how are we going to pull all this information together, what sources of information are we going to use, how are we going to trust the data that gets put into the system, that sort of thing. So basically, some of the key agreements that came out of our discussion yesterday is that the technical work group is going to be comprised of members of the full dialogue, but we will rely on outside expert advisors as they are identified to the group as being helpful. We'll have a set of advisors that can advise that group of experts who we want to rely on for information. The basic information will be drawn from the four agencies involved in this process: the EPA, the National Guard, Louisiana DEQ, and the Army. There is a strong desire and concern from folks in the work group yesterday that we get the Army involved and engaged in this process. As most of you realize, they are not yet. That effort is ongoing, but we also recognize that we're moving so fast that we can't sit around and wait for them. So we're going to be doing both at the same time, trying to get information from them, trying to engage them while we move forward. The main thing we talked about yesterday, one of the main things we talked about yesterday was where do we start in terms of the list of technologies. We'll be talking a bit later on whether or not we want to include OpenBurn in that list, but regardless of that, we have to put together a full set of technologies, and the most obvious place to start is with the Explosive Safety Board list of technologies. We began to discuss that at our meeting last week. Those technologies that were put on the table last week were those that are available for chemical weapons, including the explosive and propellants that go with those chemical weapons. But we want to make sure that we have the most comprehensive list possible. So we have asked EPA to reach out to ESB and make sure we have all the lists and the full set of lists that exist. And so the group did decide that the ESB was the best place to start. It is a good starting point, but it is possible that other technologies may be identified as we move through the process. So primarily starting with ESB, and we're trying to get the most comprehensive list we can from them.
And we'll be talking to the group before we just add any technologies. You guys will be making those decisions.
Correct, and the technical work group, that's their job really. A big part of this is to review all this stuff first, and any big choices or decisions, they'll bring back and present to the full work group. And so as you'll see later in the day with our schedule, basically over the next couple of weeks, the technical work group has two calls a week, and then comes back to the full dialogue group later in the week, usually on a Friday, to say this is where we are, this is what's going on. And so there's very much a back and forth as they work through their process. Talked about what needs to go into just sort of the basic description of the technologies we look at. We want to get a format for descriptions that's consistent so that everybody can easily access this information, understand what's there. We talked about what needs to be on that list. There's about 10 items or so as a starting point. I won't go through them all, but it includes things like, how does it work? What does it do? Can it be done on-site versus off-site? What kinds of requirements does it have in terms of space on-site? What kinds of emissions does it produce? Can they be monitored? What kind of residue does it produce? How does it need to be managed to dispose of? Can it be reused or recycled? Those sorts of things. What's the destruction efficiency? What's the maximum capacity of these systems? So we really want to look at a wide range of the kinds of factors that are important and have them assembled in a concise enough format that we can quickly get a sense of these different technologies. We also talked about whether we wanted to do a quick screen once we have this list of technologies put together, if there are some that just clearly don't meet requirements for what needs to happen at Camp Minden. So we did talk about that, and we talked about a half a dozen or so kind of go, no-go questions that we might ask around these technologies. Again, all this stuff will be posted to the website. A couple of other questions came up during the conversation in terms of what are some of the things we may need to look at moving forward. One was the safety of handling the materials on site and whether or not robotics might be something that need to be considered in that equation. The other was the fact that we are primarily looking at primary destruction technologies, which would neutralize the ignition capacity and explosive or burning risks of these materials. But then you still have a residue, and there's a whole other set of technologies or actions you have to consider in what to do with those residues, and that could include recycling, reuse, or simply disposal. And so that's also something that have to be looked at. Folks did question the RFI that the National Guard sent out and how we can coordinate with that process and make sure we have access to the information of that process, and so that we are all working together toward a goal here. A couple of other concerns just about the current stability and activity out there and the safety at Camp Minden, and can we get better and more information about that. So there's a couple of other just additional concerns that the group will probably talk about as it moves forward. Another question came up about funding with regard to the total pot of money that came out of the DOJ settlement. EPA assured the group that they're focused on safe disposal, and if more funds are necessary, then we'll deal with that as we move down the road. So that was just some of the conversation we had. Again, there's no real information to pass along right now. We have other things we have to do in this call. But by the end of next week, we hope to start having some real information to start sharing with folks.
Questions by anybody? And for folks on the webinar, you can certainly put their hands up if you want. Okay, barring not hearing any, I'm going to move along quickly just because we have a lot of pieces going on. In terms of community member updates, I wanted to address one. Last night, folks all got the email that Ron Hager sent with some particular questions in it and asking EPA to comment on it. I suspect the agency's working on how and what to do with that now. Let me just tell you guys what I've seen at other sites like this. So again, I'm the facilitator. I'm not making a judgment whether EPA will or won't. But what I've seen at other sites like this is that once a decision's been made that's in the administrative record, any kind of thing like this that Ron's asked for will only come back on paper to the dialogue or to Ron specifically, because this wasn't a dialogue request, this was his individual request, as kind of a backing up exactly what the administrative record said. And my experience is that agencies usually won't come forward and say anything in contrast to what's in the administrative record, because that would just generally put them in a difficult spot. And I'm going to open this up to let the agencies correct anything if they want, or just remain silent, because I realize I'm just saying what I've seen before. So right now where we're at in this dialogue process is looking forward. We've heard all the agencies say they're looking at alternatives. Anything that gets put in writing in a formal request back on this kind of thing, my guess is will only probably be handled by a different team, and my guess is a legal team out of the agency, and it would come back in very formal language that's probably going to be a repetition of what you've seen in the administrative record. So I'm going to pause there and let, if EPA wants to say anything, and then, Ron, I'm going to give you a shot too. I see your hands up. So EPA, do you want to correct any misperceptions I've seen at other sites? I'm not speaking for this site.
Krista, this is Sam Coleman, and you are correct.
Okay. That is what we've seen at other sites, and my guess is often these kind of responses would come from not the team you guys are working with right now, but a more, let's say, legal team. And so I just wanted to introduce it that way. Ron, go ahead, please, and speak.
Okay, I wasn't particularly making a request. I was just presenting facts in hopes of shortening the discussion on open burn, and so we can hopefully come to a consensus on whether to spend more than the 2 months we've already spent considering that as an option, or whether we can just dismiss it and look at true alternatives. I was just providing information, not really requiring a reply unless it's additional information about open burn.
And EPA, I'm going to give you a shot at it, or I'm going to try to characterize what I've seen at other places. And partly, guys, you got to realize we don't have lawyers on this team from EPA. And frankly, my experience is you don't want lawyers on this team from EPA right now. We want to be able to kind of talk and work through things in a way that's productive for everybody. Obviously, we want to be within the law, though. And so I have no doubt they're checking with lawyers, but you know, my experience is and EPA, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a CERCLA action, which means Superfund, folks. CERCLA is a long acronym that's not very important, but right now we're under the Superfund law in terms of what the open burn decision was made, and not under the RCRA law. And because of that, Superfund tends to trump any other law. And frankly, this permitting stuff's really confusing, so I'm not an expert in it. Go ahead, Ron. Was that you?
No.
Nice. Okay. EPA, did I misstate anything?
Hello. Yeah, Christy, again, this is Sam Coleman, and I think that you're accurate in your statements.
So, Ron, you know, we can talk more, because what you're proposing is outside really the dialogue process right now, and frankly, we got a lot on our plate. I think some of the very issues you get into, though, of, you know, does it meet ARARs, et cetera, is exactly what we're going to talk about in the criteria. So in some ways, I think if we spend too much time looking backwards, we will fall into a very big hole, and so we're going to need to look forward. And I think, you know, as you all have seen, the idea of, you know, are we meeting state and federal standards regarding this? Everybody has said absolutely yes, that needs to be part of the criteria. So I don't want to take up a ton more dialogue and time on this. Let's move on. If others have questions about this, please feel free to contact me, or it sounds like Sam at EPA, and we'll try to handle it. I assure you those issues are going to come up later, but there are complicated legal issues there that are hard to just pull apart right now. Let's go to updates from the government agencies quickly. EPA, did you want to address any staffing issues right now?
Yes, this is Sam Coleman, and I'll be very brief. So, as folks know, we have assembled a variety of folks here at EPA to respond and to work on very, very specific questions. So one of the names that you'll hear is Kishore Fruitwala, who heads up our combustion team here in Dallas under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. And he has many, many years' experience both on combustion issues related to RCRA, Clean Air Act, and as well as Superfund, as you mentioned before. We also have worked with our Office of Research and Development to bring some folks online that can also help us deal with some of the other questions that have come up. And they're not on the call today, but we are in frequent contact with them. So we're working very closely with our Office of Research and Development and with other elements of our offices and headquarters. So we think that we have really pulled together a great team here at EPA, along with the team that's been working on the site. And we will continue to be responsive to questions and be available to answer questions as they come up. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. I mean, one of the concerns we've heard from the dialogue is, we need the best science available out there, and we need the agencies helping out with as much knowledge as they have. Obviously, without the Army or DoD at the table, that's something we continue to work on, but let's use the best expertise we have, and appreciate EPA coming forth with a lead to help kind of help assemble and lead up some of these pieces so we can do this efficiently. Ron Stuckey, similar question to you in terms of staffing of this?
Some of you are talking about staffing of the technical working group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
I think it's been said many times by General Curtis, the military department, we don't have any one individual or organization within the military department who has any expertise in providing an evaluation of the method. Our role as defined in the agreement is once a method is recommended and approved by EPA is to issue a contract and manage that contract. And so we won't be bringing anybody to the table other than myself providing situational awareness of what's available at CampMinden to support the methods. That's all I've got.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate that. Karen, any comment on this?
DEQ has had a technical group assembled already that has already been looking at alternatives from this previously. We're going to reach back to that same technical support in regards to reviewing these alternatives for all aspects of all media to ensure the compliance with our regulations. We have engineers, permit writers, we have toxicologists to help try and support this effort in reviewing.
Thank you. Brian, you want to comment?
Yes, this is Brian Salvatore. So I have a question for the committee as a whole. Shouldn't any experts that are going to be consulted with, shouldn't we have upfront notice about who they are specifically? I know that Kishua Fruitwala was mentioned, but there was mention of some other people at the EPA's research facility as well. And I would prefer, and I think other members of our citizens group would like to know specifically who the experts are that are going to be introduced into any discussions. Even though they aren't on the committee, they should not be anonymous. There needs to be accountability from individuals.
EPA, can you provide a list and maybe even like a paragraph or CV or something, resume, a bit on the leads?
Yes, and let me just make sure that I speak with clarity here. None of the people that we will involve in this project will be anonymous. We are completely open and transparent. The names and, of course, their qualifications will be made available to the committee. The reason that I did not try to go through a complete list of names is a lot of our expertise is highly specialized, and we want to make sure as questions come up, we will bring the best and most qualified person along with their specific qualifications and names to the table to have that discussion.
Thanks, Sam. I mean, guys, what I see the technical working group coming back to the group with is hopefully kind of a big matrix in a way, and whether it's presented that way or not, but showing under each possible alternative what are the comparison points, so we can get, what are the possible fluids that come out of a process, how long might it take, what's the likely cost, all those various things, so you can kind of compare between the alternatives. And we've heard people say very clearly they want citations from where that information's from, not just randomly stated, and to the extent we need to attach with it, what experts helping with that information, we will. But having gone through an evaluation process before on chemical weapons, I got to tell you, in that case, we really had to rely on the agencies to do some of the heavy lifting of pulling that information together. Because frankly, last time I looked, you all have other jobs, and we're going to need to have them come forth with some information that then we can review and move around and question and ask things about. But that's kind of where we're at right now. So any other updates from the government agencies in terms of things going on? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to ask you guys to turn to the criteria that were attached, and it's a different document, or is it a different document? No, it's not. Oh, cool. There we go. It's on the screen for those of you that want to look at it. We're going to talk about this criteria. I'm sorry?
Chrissy, this is Francis. We're having some internet problems here, and so I can't raise my hand. I just wanted to ask if there was any update on whether or not citizens will be able to sit in on the National Guard's working group that is looking at the request for information that went out from the different companies.
Colonel Stuckey, do you want to?
Yeah, would you just repeat the question, please?
So in other dialogue committees, when there have been government agencies with parallel processes looking at either bids or quotes from different companies, there have been citizens from the dialogue committee that have been allowed to participate in that and to sign, I guess, confidentiality agreements just to make sure that the processes are happening parallel and that there's more transparency. And Christy, can you speak to this and what you've seen in other situations?
Yeah, I've seen it in one situation with the kind of a Department of the Army and Department of Defense, depending on which day it was, where they did approve for citizens to sit in the process and review various RFPs. I got to tell you, it was very unusual, and we didn't do it in quite the time frame you guys are looking at, but it has certainly been done. It may well have been done in other cases, but I've only done it in one myself that I'm aware of. And the citizens were directly at the table, involved in the process. They did have to sign confidentiality agreements because there's confidential business information. They also had to sign statements that they didn't have personal financial interest in any of the companies. And having sat in those meetings, to be honest with you, they were primarily run, in many cases, by the government agencies that make those decisions and understand how they do their request for proposal process in selecting companies. But every step along the way, citizens were there helping ensure that decisions that were made were in keeping with what the dialogue said and that the evaluations were happening in a way that people were comfortable. And those were very much done by consensus, and it worked well. Colonel Stuckey, thoughts on whether this is something you can at least pursue? And I realize the process is not really being handled out of your office for selecting a contractor. Is that correct?
That's correct, but as I appreciate it, I think the short answer to I think it was Francis's question is that we're not at the point where we're going to evaluate any proposals or offers at this time. We've got this request for information out before February deadline. Once we receive them, we're not going to take any action on those documents until, of course, this committee has completed their evaluation and they've made some recommendations. We want to evaluate some proposals that waste of time evaluating proposals that the committee has discarded. So I guess that's a short answer. We're not doing anything with it at this time.
That's very helpful to know. Thank you so much.
Mickey, on this, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question, Christy, relative to the process of gathering information. The Louisiana National Guard has requested information from vendors on this, and I don't know if this is a good time to ask the question, but I don't suppose there is a good time. So the thing that I'm most curious about is the vendors don't. We're gathering information from the Citizens Committee for the technical side on each of the technologies. And what we're finding out is that there's a limitation to what the vendors feel that they should supply because the request for information is a request for information from the Louisiana National Guard relative to an open RFP for burn proposals.
Yeah, I'm going to hold you on this one because it is an important issue, but we're going to need to deal with it within the technology working group. So I think I've heard where you're going on this. Is there's confidentiality issues and how to get information.
Well, we just don't know we'll get all the information that we need to make decent, informed decisions.
Yeah, we need to hear what Nikki has to say. Excuse me, because
I'm sorry.
The people who have some input that are important to us aren't on the technical committee. So it'd be good if he could finish his question. This is Dolores.
Thank you, Dolores, and I'm not saying it's unimportant. I'm just saying we have an agenda today. Mickey, if you want to summarize your question so that everybody understands it, and then it is something we'll put on the agenda for later, Dolores.
Oh, absolutely, and I appreciate, the concern, and we've raised this concern that the information is not forthcoming from the technologies because there's been a lot of changes as a result of the request from the Army and from us, as a matter of fact, through the companies that are supplying technologies. And all they want to do is know that their information that they submit will be confidential because it's like playing a poker game. You don't want to show your hand before you can make a decision. And the request for information is informal. So I just want to make the comment that we're going to need something somewhere along the line where we can assure the vendors that their information is secure, and that way everybody can get, including the National Guard and those in the procurement process, can get the full information, the things that we really need to do the work. And that's it. That's my summary.
We will be coming back to that. I do want to stress that if anybody on the Dialogue Committee feels like they have a conflict of interest, they have financial interest in one of the committee companies that are likely to be bidding on this, it's essential for the health of this committee and the honesty of this committee that you come forward and let the facilitators know, even if you're kind of, it's not that close, and let us discuss it as a group and be forthright just so we don't have any problems there. I also think there's probably some problems. I know some of the community groups are reaching out to the vendors directly as individuals, not as a dialogue job right now, and I think we may need to talk about that because it could really cause some problems in the RFP process down the road, the request for proposal process, in terms of how things are going forward. So I'm just putting a marker out there. Those are both things we need to address. Brian, your hand's up?
Yes, I just had a comment / question. So I just want to be careful here that we're not ascribing too much power to the Superfund, because as I understand it, the Superfund does not trump the Clean Air Act, and also the exclusion that was given here previously for this open burn was through RCRA. And so Superfund is being used in a way here that is being, convenient to let the government do what it wants, but we got to be fully retrospective here about everything and not ascribe too much power to the Superfund.
And Brian, you're absolutely right in terms of, I didn't summarize all the laws fully, and the permitting nuances are very important. I think the overall statement, I hope, still stands, though, that if we spend a lot of time trying to understand how they came up with open burn beforehand, we will not get to the business we need to going forward. And we do need to make sure going forward that any technology we come up with is in compliance with the law, certainly. So if we can focus forward for now, I think it'd be best for all of us. And realizing that, frankly, I don't have if you ask me to help clean up Ron's document to make sense of it, I can't do it right yet. I don't get the nuances there. But going forward, we need to be absolutely sure we're coming up with technologies that are legal and can be implemented. So I see you're agreeing, Brian, so I appreciate that. Let's switch over to criteria, guys. What we did was we got in, I'm sorry, somebody want to jump in? Okay. Please, for folks that are not on the webinar and can't put your hand up, that are members of the dialogue, jump in when I pause and we'll make it happen. And I realize I'm not giving big pauses given we got a big group and a lot to do. So I am looking at the criteria. I sent out a document today, or last night actually late, that had changes to it. And David, I'm having a hard time when I look at my screen. I don't see the whole document again. It's been changed.
It looks okay, Christy.
Okay. And Doug, I'll have you then work on the screen and move it to the right page because mine's not showing right.
Sure.
So let me talk a few things. First of all, I know on some of these pages comments came up in green and some came up in red. To be honest with you, one's Doug and one's me, so it doesn't matter. So if you're wondering what the difference is, we did our best to incorporate all the comments we got. In some cases, it was tougher than others, and so if you don't see your exact comment there, please know we tried. In a couple cases, we got comments that were more kind of starting the evaluation process as opposed to developing the criteria, and so those are going to come in. They're just not, we're not doing the evaluation yet. We're doing the criteria. In a couple places, we saw overlap, and so we tried not to create more overlap. This document that it's based on already has a ton of overlap, so we didn't want to make more redundancy.
We just lost the, I'm sorry, Christy,
Yep.
Oh, never mind, I got it back.
Yep,
criteria to the burn document, but we're good.
Okay. I appreciate that everybody's got documents coming in and out. I certainly do on the webinar. We're trying to get this dialed in better for everyone, so let us know your problems, and we'll try to get it best, but it's getting better now. So what I'm going to do is ask you guys kind of what are sections you can live with. So it might not be your personal preference for language, but are you close enough to okay with it? And generally, I encourage you all to kind of err on the side of more information as opposed to less, recognizing that somebody on this call gave us that language because they wanted more information. And so even if it's not your particular thing, hopefully it's not something that you need to fall on your sword on, and you can kind of fall and can live with it. Second, you heard Doug earlier say there's a lot of basic facts that we're putting together in terms of each of the technologies, and some of that's included there. So this is more the criteria that we're going to evaluate and be able to compare the technologies on. So with that, I'm going to turn to kind of the first item, number one, overall protection of human health and the environment. And I see, for interesting reasons, that for whatever reason on the screen it doesn't show up in different colors in the way it did in the document, the physical document you have, the changes. So, to the extent it helps you and you need to look at the other document I sent out, please be looking at that. But the full language is on the screen. It's just not highlighted. Are there concerns with any of the changes that have been added under number one? Anything you can't live with really gives you major heartburn. So this is number one, overall protection of human health and the environment.
This is Wilma. When
Wilma,
you added an animal, it needs to be both animal and vegetation, so something like flora and fauna.
Okay. And Doug, do you want to do these on the screen, or you want me just to do them
I can do them on it. I don't think we have that capacity, so I'll just write them in the notes.
Okay. What we will do is highlight them and get them out to the group, but flora and fauna will be added because I've heard various people express that desire.
Yeah.
Other comments or questions or concerns with what Wilma just added for number one?
And it's replacing animal, not added to.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, number two. For folks that are not used to this language, you're going to hear folks refer to ARARs, and it's one of the worst acronyms ever made, I think. What it does stand for is applicable, relevant, and appropriate requirements. It means whatever other laws are out there, we've got to be in compliance with them. So if you hear somebody say ARAR, that's what that means. So any comments or questions regarding number two, compliance with ARARs, applicable, relevant, and appropriate requirements?
Excuse me, I thought you were going to bullet point 2. number one.
No, I'm sorry. No, I went through number one, that whole category. If you want to go back, and was that you, Dolores?
Yes, that bullet point 2 is a statement that can be read a couple of different ways, and I think it might be good to clarify that last phrasing. For example, it says, the method results in emissive levels that are as low as reasonably possible. Okay, that's fine right there. We got the dot, we got the period, whatever. This next part can go either way, and this is a part that needs to be clarified. And it says it's sensitive to the elevated levels of pollution that already exist in the area. So I think we need to just make it clear that the levels that exist are currently exceptionally high and need to be either brought to a legal level or less. In other words, we can't just say sensitive to elevated levels. It doesn't, no, something's wrong there.
Yeah, I agree. It's awkward, and I was trying to keep somebody's language that they sent us. Usually the language that's used is we talk about accumulated risk, so that, if you're talking about Cancer Alley down in your state, obviously adding any kind of risk there is much more dangerous than to somebody who's living in some pristine area.
Okay.
So if you want, let me try to rewrite that with the idea that you just raised, Dolores. Is that?
Yeah. Okay.
I think we're all going for the same idea. I just think we haven't quite gotten it. And apparently my writing skill at midnight's not really something exceptional. That's an understatement, I know. So I see hands up by Brian.
Yeah, so just as a suggestion now, the EPA has maximum contaminant levels, MCLs, that you could use to make this less vague. And I think it's important that it be put into as a specific of a context as possible. So since the EPA has guidelines already, I suggest using them.
But you know what, Brian? They don't in certain things. There are certain things that are important to us that are in this M6, especially when it's burned, that they don't have any levels.
Well, for example, DNT, they do have.
Yeah, the DNT maybe, but go to that DPA.
Diphenylamine, yes.
Yeah. Brian and Dolores, can I ask you two to work on this particular sentence and try to incorporate both your ideas and send us a rewrite?
Okay.
Because I think what both you're saying is fine, and I'm not hearing disagreement on it. But I just want to make sure if we get your exact language. So if you'd help out with that, that'd be great. I see Ian's got his hand up.
I just got a question on the first bullet where you're taking off animal, and is it not going to be? Is it just going to be replaced with flora and fauna, or are we worried about the wildlife? Wasn't it animal? Wasn't that meaning? Wasn't the animal meaning? The meaning of the animal word in there for the vegetation and wildlife, or so we need to put wildlife in there somewhere, correct?
It's both animals and vegetation, so it includes all the wildlife.
Okay, good deal. I just wanted to be clear.
Yep. No, I was kind of questioning that too, to get an exact language. Wilma, you're going to send me a rewrite on that particular sentence just to make sure I fully get what you're saying for folks to look at?
Sure.
Looking, just because it's tougher to do on screen right now, looking at, so any other comments on number one? I heard a shriek, but I'm not sure that was a yes. Moving to number two, then, compliance with ARARs. Any comments on this? A lot of folks want us to get in the idea of hold, test, and release. And so I specifically just put in the exact language just so folks knew exactly what we were talking about. Okay. Going on to long-term effectiveness and permanence. Any questions or comments there? And Doug, I'm going to ask your help for a minute. My connectivity is coming and going, and so I'm losing hands if there are hands up. That's back. Never mind. Okay. So going on to reduction of toxicity, mobility, or value
on number three, on that last dot, I like the use of global, but I was a little bit surprised. Are you talking about the entire globe?
Brian, I think that was your language. You want to explain your thought there?
Well, I don't recall that being my language. I have about the entire region here, but I can save that for later.
That was my language.
I don't mind the word. I just was a little bit surprised we haven't really used that, even though it would affect things globally. Could, anyway.
Could add some context to that.
Yeah, Mickey, do you want to talk for 1 second about what you meant? Mickey, can't hear you. So we may have either lost Mickey or he's got himself on mute. *1. Okay. Does anybody? I think I assume what he was saying is, we don't want to send it to another community and put them in a tough place. Rick, your hand is up. You want to talk about this?
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment on the third bullet on number 3. It's possible that one or two of the technologies are basically just going to render the M6 non-explosive, and if that takes place, is it no longer a hazard to the site and the community, and therefore could be stored for a indeterminate period of time until it's properly recycled or whatever they're going to do with it? I mean, once it's non-explosive, is it no longer a threat, or are there still hazardous materials involved that require its removal?
I know yesterday we did talk about the need to maybe look at kind of some two-tier technologies and mixing and matching a little bit, and so that the matrix would break that out, so that first step may be let's render it non-explosive, and then the second step is, okay, now what do we do with this stuff? And obviously both are important, but the first one's a very much a time crunch compared to the second.
Right, but this says that disposal methods does not require additional treatment, and additional treatment may mean storing it, because we've rendered it non-explosive, and now we're going to store it until we figure out what we're going to do with it.
I think it says in the next point where it says disposal method does not create any more toxic products.
I see. I understand that.
Does that work?
Yes.
I've got two hands up, Rick first and then Ron.
Well, I'm off now.
Okay. Ron, Suki?
Yeah, that's item number 3, bullet number 3. I think that same comment, the disposal method does not require additional treatment, maintenance, or on-site storage at CampMinden of hazardous materials. A concern I've got, even if it's non-hazardous material and it's still on site, we got to consider where we're going to store this material, whether it's hazardous or non-hazardous, because once we pull it out and treat it in some way, and it may have to be repackaged, we need to think about do we have the physical space to store it?
So, Ron, do you want to write a storage bullet for us
Sure.
for the group to consider?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on, I'm looking at number 4, reduction of toxicity, mobility, or volume through treatment. Comments, questions on that section?
Christy, this is Jenny Reynolds.
Go ahead, Jenny. Welcome.
Thank you. I believe it's the last bullet in section number 4 that mentions the waste in the packaging. Don't many of these technologies produce some sort of packaging waste or other waste that would need to be dealt with? I'm not the technical expert, but if someone else can answer to that, I just want to make sure we don't talk ourselves into a situation where we're putting ourselves in a corner.
And somebody had suggested the or eliminates, and I think for the reason you just suggested, Jenny, it may make more sense for minimize residual, and then you guys will see, hopefully, the amount of stuff that's going to come out at the end, and you can compare. And if one of the technologies ends up with a lot versus one that has very minimal, that will give you some information. Whereas if you go to has zero, that you may not end up with an alt tech that does that, alternative technology that provides that.
Exactly. Thank you.
So if folks are okay, I'm going to take out the word or eliminates. I want to acknowledge that was somebody's concern, but I think at this point you want to compare how little, and obviously you're going to want the least, not the most. Or
right. Well, yeah.
Hopefully.
Assuming if there is an option, for example, to recycle it or pack it all up and move it off site or whatnot, I would assume that would result in quite a bit of packaging waste. Yeah, I think just keeping it at minimizing might be better.
Okay. Ron Stuckey, you have your hand back up, or is that old?
I'm sorry, that's up.
I'm sorry, yes? No, okay. Short-term effectiveness. Several folks have said, gosh, what is relative short-term and the need to define this? It is a problem. You will see at the bottom of this draft document on criteria, I started to make a list of, maybe we need to have the technology committee help define a few words, and one was kind of what's safe and expedient, because I think, for a variety of folks, what's a short-term mean? And again, it may be like the discussion we just had, who does it under what amount of time? And you may not be able to define short-term. I mean, we all know if somebody says it's going to take 20 years to eliminate something, that's probably not a technology their community is very interested in. But I suspect we'd start dividing, at different periods of time that some of us may agree with or not agree with. So if folks are okay, I'd like to take out the need to define this for now and assume, we are going to need to define that, but it's going to be more at a later. It's going to be more comparison between them all. Any comments with short-term effectiveness? Sam, go ahead, sir.
I just have a comment about the eliminate. I think it may not be possible to eliminate, so I think we ought to say decrease.
Okay. Or does the word just taking out eliminate, Sam, and leaving in just minimizes, and then we compare how much?
I just don't think you can say eliminate the risk. So whatever you say is fine, but I think to evaluate against eliminating is pretty tough.
Yep, I hear. We don't want to end up with zero alternatives here, because keeping the stuff in your community is not acceptable. Okay. Moving on to number 5, and guys, what's going to happen is I'm going to rewrite this based on some of the comments all the comments you guys have given me, and get it back out to you to kind of take one last look and to make sure we all get where we're at. So, if I'm moving quickly, recognize you're going to get another chance to look at this. Number 5. Number 6, implementability.
Yes.
Can I go?
Okay. Number 7, cost. And at this point, I want to turn, I don't want the long discussion on this. I want the short discussion if possible, but can we have both EPA and the GARD kind of give a quick, I had lots of people ask questions about how much money is available for this. And you heard yesterday on the technical call that EPA said, hey, we're going to work on the finance end of this. But I did have people say, can you just give us some information right now in terms of what the status is of the finances? And Ron Stuckey, maybe if you could lead that a little bit and then turn to EPA or others for any comments. And lots of questions also about the insurance funds from Explo.
You'll have to give me a few minutes because I've got to find it in the AOC. It clearly explains it. Just give me a couple minutes.
Okay. Let's leave that. I'm going to go on, and we'll come back to it, Ron, when you get it. Any comments? I'm going to take out that question on the cost. That was just a note to us. Any question about cost or state acceptability? Folks had asked that the state state acceptance and community acceptance have the same language, and so that's why I changed it to accepted. That was the request, so they're just consistent with the other. Any comments on 8 or 9?
This is Wilma. Just one of the concerns is if we have to have it accepted by the Louisiana legislature, how long will that process take, and will it hold us up at the end?
Good question.
That's a good question.
What about not opposed for these? Because, waiting for...
It may be that you just want to center it on the legislators in the area.
And I agree with you. If you expect our state legislature to agree one way or the other, you'll still be talking about this next year.
Mary Lee, I second that as well.
Okay.
What about Senate Environmental Committee? This is Bob Flanoy. Maybe we put that in there, the Senate Environmental Committee.
I'm not sure that I want to put it in there so specifically. Then we'll have to be held to whatever we put in there. And really, the legislature, I agree with Dr. Subra and I think Colonel Stuckey, the legislature is very hard to predict, and they don't always get things done when they have to. So I just don't want us to get trapped by that.
So not opposed by local Louisiana legislative members?
Does local elected officials already get us to where we need to be?
Yeah. Should we strike the first line, guys?
I think so. This is Mary Lee.
Yeah, I would say it needs to be. I would say that it needs to be. I guess not opposed by the local legislation of the districts affected. Maybe I don't know. But I agree that if we try to wait on the entire legislature to agree, that it was going to take way too much time.
So was that you, Jenny?
Yes, sorry.
Sorry, I'm getting better at voices, but I don't know everybody. So not opposed by, or do you want to, what's the language we want to go with here?
Can I kick this one to Gene and ask him to get back with you?
That'd be great.
Okay.
It's on his assignment list. Thank you. Okay, and then community acceptance. Any comments on that one? And then there's some definitions here. I'm just going to leave those. Obviously, we're not going to leave those on the criteria, but we're obviously going to have some clarity in some of these definitional things.
Christy, I need you to go back to number 8.
Yep. Is that Ron?
Yeah, on the disposal method accepted by the Louisiana National Guard. The previous language had supported, and I've already run that by my leadership, and their agreement was supported, but not with acceptance.
Okay.
That's probably a better word throughout, actually.
This is Karen. I agree with Colonel Stuckey.
So suggestions on how to proceed on that one?
This is Frances. Maybe this is a legal thing, but I don't really understand what the nuance is between support and accept and why people have strong opinions about that. Can someone explain that to me?
I'll get the lawyers to explain it to you, not me.
Thank you.
Sam, your hand is up. Are you on this topic?
Well, my comment was I don't know why it needs to be accepted by the legislature in the first place. It's being accepted by the Guard and by the DEQ and the DHS and the state police and the Louisiana State Homeland Security. All those folks work for the government, so it would seem to me that if they all agreed, there's probably not any reason to talk about the Louisiana legislature. I would just leave it off, period.
So this is kind of going back to just go to the next one, which says local elected leaders, officials.
That's just me. I'm not going to get hung up on it, but I'm just, like somebody made the point, we never will get them to accept anything. So I would just leave it off. I don't know why I have to be accepted by them.
could folks live with leaving off the first bullet for now, and also instead of putting accepted, put not opposed by? Because I think that's to having to get an affirmative yes in some.
Krista, so what happens if somebody from Timbuktu in South Louisiana opposes it then? I mean, you're putting yourself in a box. I'm saying we are fairly certain there's not going to be any local elected officials that is going to oppose getting rid of this stuff.
Yep.
The National Guard is part of the process. DEQ,
yep.
DHS, state police, all these folks are part of the process. So none of them are going to oppose whatever we come up with. But these people who are not, you are inviting people in who are not a part of the process, and yet you're giving them the right to oppose it. I don't understand that.
So, Sam, help me out. What would you have it say?
I'm telling you what I would have it say. I would leave disposal method accepted by the Louisiana legislature off.
Yeah, no, I think we've all agreed with that. So the question is then what verb below? Would you go keep with accepted, given that that's causing some heartburn with folks? Or do we go to, after we take the first bullet off entirely, not opposed by on the rest of the list?
I think it's kind of on all of those specific agencies, since they are part of this process, I think it's kind of counterproductive to assume that they're not going to be accepting of what we have all agreed to come up with. So I wouldn't do that. Now what about the local officials? I would just leave it as it is. I think the only house, in my opinion, the only house that we have is with the Louisiana legislature. Everybody else is really involved in this process.
So your suggestion is take off the first bullet and leave the rest of the language as it is.
That's just mine. I mean, I don't care if you change the word accepted, but I'm saying the rest of the people have already invested something in this process.
Yep.
The only people who are not vested in this process is the Louisiana legislature. So I would just take them off and leave everything else the same.
Yeah. And I think everybody appreciates that Gene Reynolds is certainly, from my understanding, very invested in this, but there's been some family health issues that he's been dealing with this week.
That's exactly right. So I'm saying the only issue there, as far as I'm concerned, is the Louisiana legislature.
Okay.
And if you want to change the word accepted, I don't have a problem with that, but I think everybody else is vetted in this thing. I mean, I just think the only people up there that we've given too much power to is the Louisiana legislature.
So the proposal on the table, guys, is to strike the first bullet for now, leave the language as it is with the marker that Ron would have to run back up his chain of command of the difference between accepted versus supported.
Or, excuse me, Ms. Dolores, we could just put supported where they have used that word. That's not a bad word. I mean, either one would work.
This is Jenny again. I was unable to get in touch with Gene, but as long as he's going to be allowed to be considered one of the local elected officials on the next line, I think he would be fine with that. But by definition, he's not a local elected official. He is a state elected official. And since he is on the dialogue committee process, I don't want to completely eliminate that entirely. But I do agree it's kind of a sticky situation, because we can't have.
What about elected officials from the local area?
Yeah, so maybe local area. I'm not sure how the language needs to be, but.
Okay. Guys, I think we're close enough on this one that we're going to have Gene check on it. Ron, do you want to comment on your piece of it? Supported versus accepted, and whether you want to run that back up the chain, or do you want us to just change it back to supported?
Change it back to supported, please.
Okay. And I see I have, hands went down. Sam, you're still up. I assume you're good with where we're at. Okay. We're going to try to rewrite this section, guys. I think we've got it. I think we're starting to get into wordsmithing with my closest friends on the phone, and we got a lot of us, so let's keep moving. Any other comments on community acceptance? Okay. And please send me other comments in terms of technical definitions that you're wanting, and we'll see what to do with those later. I'm going to go back to Colonel Stuckey and see if you've had a chance to get any of that cost information, just for folks to kind of get some common understanding of that. Have you found that special document on your desk?
Yeah, I'll try to explain it. It's for funds that are available that the Army or the Department of Justice have agreed to, and David and Mr. Coleman, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this stuff, you guys know as well as I do, they've agreed to pay for what they call the future response cost, which is the removal effort. It's $24,140,000. There are an insurance claim at a value of about $4 million that's pending. I think the likelihood of getting that's very slim, but that's in the AOC that says those funds, those $4 million will be utilized for payment of some oversight cost, and anything left over can be utilized for the removal effort.
And you said, Brian, I saw your comments on there, and we'll come back to you, but you said very slim chance of that insurance money. Can you add another sentence about what you mean there?
Yeah, I just know the lawyers have been wrestling with it for going on 2 years now, and I don't think the company's gone bankrupt. Their insurance company has filed a fraudulent claim against them, so it's one big legal battle. It's not black and white.
Yep, that's helpful. Brian?
Okay, yeah. So with regards to local and even more regional concerns I have here is the effects of some of the methods. Anything that is going to increase NOx in the atmosphere is going to have a very detrimental effect on pollution levels. And I know that the Shreveport-Bossier area, Caddo Parish specifically, is up at the very high end of what's allowed under the Clean Air Act for ground level ozone. We're up around 70 parts per billion. The limit is 75 parts per billion, and that may be lowered next year. So what that would mean is if a method is selected here which would increase the levels of NOx, this would contribute to more ozone production in this area. We would not be able to finish I-49. We would not be able to get any permits from the EPA for any heavy industry whatsoever in this entire region. So this is something I think that has been unstated or at least understated up to this point, and I wanted to point it out.
So Brian, do you want to add a separate bullet specifically addressing this and kind of think about the language and send us it to show to the rest of the group?
I can do so, yes.
Okay. And any concerns with what Brian's added?
I don't quite understand what he was talking about. Or is anything we're going to do increase the ozone level?
Oh, yes. NOx are nitrogen oxides, and they contribute to the formation of ground-level ozone, particularly when there are a lot of volatile organic compounds. Now, we know we have those because of all the fracking that is going on in this area. So we have a perfect storm for having a huge spike in ground-level ozone when we're already up at the top. And if you want to see a similar example, go look at Salt Lake City. Look at a picture from 10 years ago. Look at a picture today during a inversion there. They're up at around 150 parts per billion. It's just awful there, and it's a very unhealthy situation for that entire region.
Can we minimize that on our level? What do we need to do to stop that?
You don't want to produce nitrogen oxides, so any form of combustion would do that. Even an incinerator burn, which is not doing adequate NOx scrubbing, would produce a lot of NOx. Remember, these compounds are all nitrated already. There's lots of nitrogen and oxygen in them. They're going to be creating a lot of NOx through any sort of combustion.
So we have to have something that disposes of these particular chemicals more thoroughly than...
Well, anything that would be dealt with in terms of a combustion would have to have NOx scrubbing, and that can be tedious and somewhat expensive, but it would be necessary to do it. We cannot afford to produce high levels of ground level ozone in this region. It'll be economic suicide for all of us.
I see.
So, Brian, if you will get some language, it might fit best in number 4, the last bullet, but take a look and see what you see. Other comments or concerns? I see Colonel Stuckey, you have your hand up. Any other comments on the criteria?
I'm sorry, I meant to take it off, excuse me.
Okay.
Can I just suggest that maybe Brian's would be better under number 2, where it talks about meeting federal requirements?
That's where it'll go.
You're right.
Here.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So, Brian, I'll look for language there. So a few folks have assignments to look at. Wilma, you're going to get me some language.
Yes.
Brian and Dolores, you're going to get me a little bit of language. And Jenny, you're going to talk with Gene and check with him. So I think, guys, we're pretty close on this. So what I'd like to suggest, if folks are comfortable, I'm going to get you back out a document the next day or two, as soon as I get these assignments in from folks, revised, and I'll put all the new comments in red line or strikeout so you can see the changes, so we're not sneaking anything in on you, and look for you to kind of get us any comments and see if we're pretty close. I think we can probably finish this up electronically. That being said, folks need to let me know. If you're not getting stuff electronically and not checking your email, we need to come up with a different system for you. Let me know, because I don't want folks to feel like 2 days later, oh, I didn't know, and feel a little blindsided. We're trying to keep everybody on board, but I appreciate not everybody lives on email.
Christy?
Yep?
This is Rebecca.
Yes, my dear?
I have a question regarding what we're talking about with the elected officials, especially with Gene.
Yep.
Are we saying that if we don't want any other legislators involved in the decision making or approval, them having a say so for approval, is there not a reason? I mean, Gene is already on the dialogue committee. What other elected officials do we have on the dialogue committee? I mean, can we not word that to where the ones that are on the dialogue committee are, they're an exception to that?
Well, we currently have, local mayors and a number of different elected officials, and I think the question is, we certainly just don't, if you've got, let's say you had the mayor of Minden, for example, disliked the proposed technology, he should be working through this dialogue, first of all, and he is, right. But that would be a huge factor if you've got local officials that are opposing something. That would really impact, I think, you guys' decision making.
Sure.
And so I think that's what we're hoping to do, is make sure that we don't have major opposition from others that have been elected in your community to represent citizens.
Okay, absolutely. I wanted clarification on that.
Yep. So, guys, let's turn to the next topic then, which is I'm going to go back and talk about the goal for the dialogue committee. You'll see we're still at option 1 and 2. As I put kind of in the language above, it says, somebody else need to jump in? Sorry, when I hear feedback, I'm just trying to check and make sure it's not somebody trying to get in. We got, in writing, to be honest with you, we got lots of support for option number 2 from a pretty good diversity of folks, particularly given that there was some interest in the second paragraph. There's been other folks that preferred option number 1, but frankly, we're still kind of divided. I want to be clear, I think we're not divided on whether or not the community accepts or doesn't accept open burn. I think, as the paragraph in the second option 2 says, it's widely accepted by state and federal officials that in the dialogue that open burn is strongly opposed by much of the population and would be extremely difficult to implement. I think the question is whether folks want to spend time kind of having open burn on the list or not. What I think may make the most sense here is just to do a quick kind of list of pros and cons of option 1 versus option 2 from different people so folks can hear each other and then see where we're at. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because I think actually we're not that far apart substantively in some ways. So if folks want to speak out for one particular option or another in terms of what do you think the pros are for option 2 or option 1? Rick, go ahead.
Yes, I'm not strongly against either one of them, but somehow I feel like the outcome of this event will have national repercussions. And I think it's very important for it to be historically accurate. So along those lines, I would say that we ought to bring open burn, open detonation out, and properly bury it. And the outcome really shouldn't be debatable. I mean, we feel pretty strong that it's a non-entity at this point. But it's always been verbal discussions. I think by bringing it out, it makes it go on document and makes this whole thing historically accurate. That's my reason for voting for number 2.
Thank you, Rick. Mickey? Mickey, we can't hear you. Star 1? Still not getting you, Mickey.
Mickey's line disconnected.
Okay. Let's go to Brian, and Mickey will come back and join us maybe. Brian, go ahead. And again, I'm not asking you guys to vote necessarily. Just tell me some pros and cons so that others can kind of think about the wide range. I don't think there's a substantive disagreement here. It's a little bit of a political, how do folks want to position themselves? How do they want to position the dialogue? Go ahead, Brian.
Well, yeah, let's look back and reflect while we're all here right now, spending 2 hours 2 times a week on a call. It's because open burning was on the table and the community very strongly opposed it. So the fact is that I think there's posturing going on here, and unless that posturing could be substantiated by any credible science whatsoever, open burning has no right to be discussed any further. Let's move on.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Any other comments on this?
Chris, this is Rebecca.
Yep.
I have been involved in 3 or 4 different meetings where I have spoken in the past week or so. I can tell you as far as concerned citizens, and I mean the residents of Bossier, Webster, Claiborne, those areas specifically, I believe all of your citizens are going to be very relieved when they hear finally that open burn, open detonation is no longer a method.
Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Anyone else? Pros or cons?
This is Wilma.
Go ahead, Wilma.
In option 2, the paragraph that's highlighted, I think is worth putting in there for historical, because there are going to be people in years to come that are going to look back and see how we approach this. And the highlighted paragraph is much more descriptive of telling that open burn was not acceptable and therefore we're doing the other things.
Okay, thank you, Wilma. Appreciate it. So again, guys, I want you to hear we're not hearing a substantive difference so much as just understanding the how this is going to be perceived publicly, and some folks thinking it's important historically. So it's both ways. Sam, go ahead.
The only comment I have not bumped. Well, first of all, you all know, I'm sure, my personal position on open burn is pretty much like Brian's. But I'm also listening to what everybody is saying about this, particularly what Ms. Huber said. So, but has anybody done this? I haven't. What if we mess around here and bump? Are we sure we're going to eliminate open burn? I mean, against our criteria? Who said that? I'm saying I am opposed to open burn for the simple reason I don't want anybody killing me on purpose. But I'm just saying, but are we so sure that when we get through this criteria and evaluate open burn against the 9 criteria, that we're going to eliminate it?
Only if we put health in there and statistics and science.
I'm not trying to say we won't. I'm just. We all, those of us who are from the concerned group, we know why we are opposed to it. We know why we are here. That's a fact. And so, but I understand what Wilma said about going through the method, going through the criteria to historically establish that the reason why we got rid of it was really not so much emotion, but was because of the science involved, and so and because of this criteria that we use. So I say, okay, that's fine if we are sure. I mean, what if we have five options, and that joker comes in like number 2 or 3? I'm just saying, that concerns me. I don't know. You all know how I'm opposed to it. I'm just concerned that it doesn't come out. I'm not trying to set it up not to come out, but I'm just saying, if you evaluate it and that's your criteria, then you have to be honest in your you have to be honest in your evaluation.
I don't really understand what you're saying. This Dolores.
I understand it. I'm saying you and I and Brian and Francis and all the folks on this concerned citizen thing, we are opposed to open burn because we simply believe that it is detrimental to our health. Period.
Based on the science.
No, I'm not interested. Well, I guess so. I believe that if you burn this stuff and put it into the atmosphere, that you're going to harm me, the soil, the water, the air, and my cows. I believe that. And nobody can convince me otherwise. I believe that. All right? Now, I started off believing that not so much on the science, just believing that if you put all that junk in the air and knowing already where I live and the things that we've already done at the ammunition plant, that's how I got started. So now we're saying, okay, we got this objective criteria. But the reason why we got to the objective criteria was because of what Brian said. We all agreed that open burn was detrimental to our health. So now we have come up with criteria to evaluate all of these options now to possibly include open burn. And what I'm saying is, that's fine, but what if open burn, aside from the fact that it may kill us, suppose it comes out okay in the evaluation process? Then I'm going to be back to square one, but I don't see my point of it is, I don't really care how it evaluates. That's my point. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just saying I don't care how open burn comes out in the criteria. I'm still going to be opposed to it because I'm not interested in how it costs. I'm not interested in whether it's RCRA or strictly approved. I'm not interested in if anybody. The only thing I'm interested in is the thing that it may do to my health and to the people around me, the folks that I love, my neighbors, and future generations. That's the only criteria I'm using, that I think this stuff is detrimental to our health. But that's not all that we are evaluating it against. We got 9 criteria up there.
That's true, but one of the big ones and the number one is the health. And if you just take the smallest percentage, that DPA, of which there's going to be 75 tons burned, this is what it says. Avoid breathing dust, fumes, gas, mist, vapor spray, very toxic to aquatic life, long-lasting effects. During a fire, irritating and toxic gases may be generated by thermal decomposition and combustion. If incinerated, toxic and corrosive combustion gases must be properly handled. Toxic if inhaled, swallowed, or absorbed through the skin. Now, how are we going to put an okay on that and give it a high rating? And that's the smallest amount of the most poisonous things that are going in there. There's another 225 tons of DPB and 750 tons of DMT. This stuff is legal. It's not our imagination.
So, guys, everything you're saying has important relevance, but we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Right now we're trying to be clear on what the goal is, and I know, Sam and Dolores, why you're kind of thinking how that's going to play out, and it's important. Let me try to I see I have Mickey up and Ron. Let me propose something, and then if you guys want to say your piece and also comment on my proposal, just trying to move this forward. I'm hearing much more passion that we need to go with option 1 than passion for option 2 in some ways. What if we took option 1, but put the paragraph in yellow and put it under option 1? And so the goal is going to be, looking at the top of option 1, identify and evaluate alternative methods to open burn. But then underneath that, all the bullets, it's going to say the evaluation will focus primarily on alternative technologies to open burn, but the technology working group will apply the criteria to open burn also for informational purposes. So it's all that paragraph would get moved under option 1. So I'm going to turn to Mickey and then Ron for comment, and that's a possible idea. Just trying to figure out how to move us forward here.
I hope I'm coming in now.
Yep, Mickey, go ahead. Sorry.
Good. Hey, listen, Christy, I think that the reason the EPA put the 90-day extension on this was specifically to evaluate alternative technologies. The National Guard issued a request for information for alternative technologies. So the entire discussion that we're here about is revolving around the search for alternative technologies to open burn. So I agree with what your statement is, and I think that it would, I move that we do exactly what you said, but I think I'd like to evaluate these relative to open burn. So I'll keep open burn off the table. We're really looking for alternative technologies.
Okay. Thank you, Mickey. Ron, go ahead. Ron, we can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Star 1. So, guys, I'm going to ask folks, to the extent you know how, to go to that are on the web, to go to your hand thing, the little piece that has the hand held up above, and select status there, and put up anybody that has a problem with what I'm proposing. I want you to mark disagree. And the proposal at this point is to go with option 1. But to insert paragraph 2, the paragraph in yellow, into option 1. That's kind of what I'm thinking at the moment. May address everybody's concerns that I'm hearing. It's not perfect, but it may get towards it.
Christy, this is Jenny. I just sent you comments from Gene, if you want to review those. But from what he said, it sounds like he would be okay with going with option 1 and including that paragraph. Okay. Any other? Yep, go ahead, jump in.
We're at the city. We're having a really hard time with the internet, so we're not able to look at this as you're editing it. I did want to respond to someone that had asked about the criteria earlier, and the NCP criteria. Jane Williams and I looked through it and tried to evaluate open burn against it, and felt like it failed pretty thoroughly. And I think that we will likely find the same thing if we evaluate it again. I am concerned that the local community, may or may not be trusting the dialogue committee at this point, and may be skeptical or scared that, all these agencies may do something that we don't want to do, and they don't know that the dialogue committee will be able to stop it. And so if it looks publicly like we are leaving open burn on the table, I am concerned that undermines the trust in the process. On the other hand, I do know that there is concern that the Army is not at the table, that the Army is the only party that we don't know really where they are, other than they wanted open burn in the first place. And I am, concerned that if they are able to come back and be like, well, you didn't even look at our option, if that puts us in a bad place. I'm with Colonel Mims in that, there will be no open burn, and we will do what we have to do to stop it. But I don't know which way is the best way to stop it, whether looking at it with knowledge that we're not going to do it is the best way, or not looking at it at all is the best way.
Possibly, let's have the Army put in the information that we need to justify open burn, and use it as the criteria that we measure against. They've got the criteria. This is their big idea. They should lay out the open burn information.
One of the challenges is you want to make sure everybody's comparing apples to apples, so that you want to make sure they're comparing if they're doing the open burn evaluation, that they're doing it in the same way that everybody else is. But so I've got 3 hands up. Sam, are you up again or down? Is that old or new?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm down. How do you get down?
Yeah, go up and it says put your hand down. I'm going to go to Ian and then Rick and Annetta. And guys, again, kind of the proposal on the table, if you are willing to live with it, is kind of option 1, but adding the yellow paragraph underneath option 1. And for folks that can't see this on the web, this is exactly, we're not editing on the screen. This is what you were sent last night. And so go to Ian. Oh, Ian's down. Rick?
You have answered my question.
Okay, thank you. Rick?
Okay, I'm certainly not for bringing open burn back on the table. All I want is a documentation, since it's already been evaluated and it's been disregarded as a possibility. I just want that stated in some written format for historical purposes. I don't want to bring open burn back on the table, and I've said it before. Colonel Mims is going to have to push me aside if he wants to lay down in front of a piece of equipment. So I'm strongly for it not being allowed, but I just want it to be documented as that in paragraph added to number 1 should do that.
Okay.
Well,
okay, thank you. And Rick, go ahead.
I'm on the technology committee, and I'll probably be one of the people having to write this criteria for open burn, and I don't want to deal with open burn at all. I feel like the people who put this forth should have to provide the information and deal with it. If they want to give it to us, fine, but I don't want to take 5 minutes of my time looking at this. I've spent enough time looking at this.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think you probably are not the only one that feels that way. Annetta, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to know, could we add the word only, informational purposes only?
Yeah. Okay. I'm writing it down on my copy.
Yeah, only for informational purposes, whichever one is grammatically correct.
Yep. So, guys, what I'm thinking we should do is, we've got a few folks that aren't on the call, and this is important. I'm going to rewrite it based on the comments we've discussed. I really think if you guys listen to yourselves, you're not arguing substantively about something. You're trying to figure out how to position yourself both in your community and what people think of this dialogue, and how to position yourself in regards to the broader politics of this. So, I appreciate everybody's endurance to getting through this. So I do see I have 2 cards up. Devon? Not here. And you star 1, please. Okay, and I'm going to go to Ron Stuckey. I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Dr. Bob Flanoy. I've been listening to this. Yep. We're just going around a circle. The thing is, with open burn, you're going to have 2 effects. 1, severe health, and number 2, you're going to go over the NOx levels, which EPA has already stipulated it's in parts per billion. So, I mean, that's going to open up a can of worms. If you put this stuff in the air, the NOx levels will go sky high. Is that right, Brian?
So, Bob, you're heading down the evaluation track. You comments in terms of going with the option that we're talking about, option 1 with the yellow paragraph and the word only underneath?
Right.
Okay. Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, just want to comment to that option 1, just to add one word, just my thought, okay?
Yep.
But you were saying identify and evaluate. It's got to be something that we evaluate. I would suggest we add the word identify, evaluate, and recommend. Thank you.
Okay. Christy, my hand is up, and I have an X, too.
Oh, I see your hand up. Your X only. I'm sorry, Brian. Go ahead. It
both
doesn't show both. Funny. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
The thing that I disagree is if you're saying that all of us are arguing here to posture ourselves. That's not the case at all. I think that the word primarily in your paragraph needs to be removed. That's giving too much of an in to the opportunity.
Okay.
Now, I could sit here for 3 hours and present evidence based on peer-reviewed papers and things that are known about why open burning is wrong. And
okay, so Brian, I just scratched the word primarily.
Okay.
when I wrote that paragraph the first time, it was for something else we were trying to do, right? So we're trying to adjust here.
I'll be okay with that, John, but I also want you to understand that there is so much evidence there that we simply do not have the time to be presenting it when that's not the reason we're here. We're here to find the alternatives. So it's not just posturing.
And believe me, I didn't mean to imply anybody was posturing. They're important policy decisions. And I think what I've heard some folks say is that if you guys come up with technology Y that you like, and all of a sudden some other party comes back in and says, no, open burn is better because, and it says all these, it costs half as much and it can be done 20 times quicker and stuff. Some folks have said it might be helpful to have the numbers, your numbers, to be able to say, well, really it's not that cheap, or it's not this, and it's not that. So I think it's not that folks are disagreeing substantively on whether open burn is good or bad. I don't hear that conversation happening. I hear you're talking about what does it make sense in terms of how the dialogue's viewed by the public locally, and then how it's impacted policy-wise. So I think we're pretty close. So right now I'm going to tell you the proposal I have on the table is option 1. The Colonel's asked that we add the word recommend to identify and evaluate at the very beginning, and I'm going to put a marker on that because there's some, as you guys have heard me say, there's a little bit of concern in terms of this group making recommendations in certain ways. We just got to watch some of our language there, so I'm going to put a marker as to whether we can do that. Then we're going to insert the paragraph in yellow with 2 changes. One, we're going to strike the word primarily in the first sentence, and second, we're going to add at the end of that sentence for informational purposes only. So I'm going to pause for a minute. Anybody that's having major heartburn and can't live with that, let me know.
Christy, I have one more suggestion. This is Frances.
Go ahead.
In that very last line of that paragraph where it says it would be extremely difficult to implement, I think that it would be very sort of clear to the community and everyone if we could change extremely difficult, which I understand is strong language, to impossible. And I think that would make me feel like I could live with this.
Do you mind having her repeat that? This is Mary Lee.
Last, the yellow paragraph, last sentence on the page that says, blah, blah, dialogue, that open burn is strongly opposed by much of the local population in the area, and thus it would be, Frances's word, impossible to implement this technology in an expeditious manner.
Thank you.
Brian, I'm seeing your hand up. Comments on this?
No, sorry.
Okay.
No hand. I take it down.
Yep. Sam?
I know we're spending too much time on this, but it is widely acknowledged by the state and federal government entities in the dialogue that open burn is strongly opposed by much of the local population in the area, and thus it would be extremely difficult to implement in an expeditious manner. That sounds almost like that we would do it
information on their computer.
If it wasn't for the time.
Just came back home.
So, guys, we're picking up feedback from somebody that's having another conversation. If you could put your phone on mute, that'd be great.
Real worried about you.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That and thus.
Folks, if you're not talking, can you please put your phones on mute? Thanks.
What I'm saying is this. When you say it would be extremely difficult to implement in an expeditious time, in an expeditious manner, that sounds like that if we had time, we would implement this. We don't care how much time we got. We're not going to do this. Am I making sense?
I think so. I'm thinking maybe we should just put a period after area and let it go at that, get rid of all the rest of it.
Because it sounds like that if we had time, we would do it. Well,
yeah, you're right. That's the way it's written. Yeah. That's sure what it says.
Right.
Any contrast to the idea of putting a period after opposed by much of the local population in the area? Period.
Let's do it.
Okay. Guys, we're going to close this discussion out. You'll see it in writing. Go with can you live with it? not is this how you'd write it, sitting at home alone, but I think we're close enough. So with that, we're making good progress, guys. We've covered the criteria. I want to turn it to Doug for a minute to talk about the schedule, and then if we can, we'll talk about public comment. We'll take public comment. So, Doug, schedule?
Christy.
Yep. Hold on. There's a question out there. Yes?
Hey, this is Stephen from the city of Shreveport, and I hate for us to have to go back, but I agree with putting the period and taking the rest off, but I was thinking maybe because we're doing this for historical perspective to take out much, because I haven't heard anybody from the local community, certainly the calls we've received, we haven't seen anybody in favor of it, and so much kind of leaves the door open for, much of the population kind of leaves the door open as if there's somebody out there in favor of it. And, just based on the dialogue I've had with folks, I haven't seen anybody in favor of it. And so I just kind of wanted to see if we can get that some consideration, scratching much. But I don't want to become too much of a wordsmith.
My experience is whenever you say anything definitively, you will find someone that has been quiet that will come forth. And maybe most all of the local population?
Or the majority, some. I just haven't.
Let's just say the local population, because they're going to hear. They're going to hear. This isn't no.
Yep. Okay. By the local population.
You don't have to quantify, right?
Yep. Okay. Moving on. Schedule.
Okay. So we talked earlier about how quickly this is moving, and we'll distribute this schedule right after the call as well, and it's also posted online. As I mentioned, we're looking at basically the next couple of weeks, 2 technical work group conference calls, and then a full committee call at the end of the week, similar to how we did this week, although we just had the single technical call. So that would mean that next week we are looking at technical work group calls on Monday and Wednesday. I did have a number of people send me conflicting times, and frankly, everybody's conflicts sort of canceled each other out, and I tried to basically make a few minor time adjustments that make it equally bad. Someone was
you're going to have to repeat your
last
2 sentences. Yeah, go ahead.
So we recognize that not everybody is going to be able to be on every minute of every call. We are going to record every call. You can always go back and listen to them. We are going to work to help people catch up with the calls and the information. We will send out all information ahead of calls so they have things that they can respond to and give us feedback and input if they're not going to be on the call up front, and do everything we can to make it work. Right now, these are proposals. Recognized with a group this size, to try to accommodate everybody's schedule will be difficult, and so we're going to have to move forward and do our best here. Basically, the process will be that the technical work group is going to be compiling the technology descriptions and looking for a way of arraying that information in some sort of table or some sort of format, right, to compare them against our criteria and give overviews of all that stuff back to the full dialogue committee. So you look at next week, we're looking at calls on Monday and Wednesday of the technical work group, and then a call of the full committee on Friday the 27th. That would allow the full dialogue group to see what's happened so far, what's there, and provide feedback to the technical work group. Then the following week, again, Monday, Wednesday, and then the follow-up meeting on the Thursday of that week with the full dialogue committee. We adjusted Tuesday and Thursday times slightly to help some of our professors who are on these calls who unfortunately had competing conflicts, so they'll each miss a little bit of the call either at the beginning or the end. And on on the final week of the process, and the hope is we can move this quickly and we can get all this done in this kind of time frame. It is very aggressive. It will be very, very challenging. It will require us to be getting significant amounts of real-time information from the agencies and other experts that we intend to use. Time to get it in front of the committee and the full committee and the work group in time to have these conversations. We would end up the process, or at least get to a place with the process, with a meeting on Wednesday, the 11th of March, where we would try to kind of pull it all together, do this in person, so that we could have a decent chunk of time and some real interaction. And we recognize that it's challenging to work together on these phone calls in as productive a manner, although I do have to applaud everyone for your use of the technology and how well it has worked. With that, I see a number of hands, so let me go to questions that people seem to have. Sam?
Oh, I'm sorry, my hand's not up.
Okay. Dr. Flournoy, is your hand up?
Yes, I'm looking at our agenda for today, and on the agenda it says present proposed technical approach. I guess that's what we've been going through and looking at the criteria. Is that right?
Yeah, that was part of it. We basically just at the beginning of the call talked about what the results of the technical work group from yesterday, and that's as far as we've gotten with the technical approach at the moment.
Well, I have an idea I'd like to present to the group when it becomes appropriate about these vendors vying for disposal of M6, which I think would bring the vendors to us to make an oral presentation. That's the bottom line.
Okay. We'll have a chance to do some wrap-up comments, and that's a more detailed conversation that we would have in the technical work group.
Right.
Rick, is your hand up?
Yes. Is it possible to get a complete listing of all the members involved in the technical work group? I'm going to try to listen to as many of them as I can, and it's a lot difficult when I really don't know who's speaking or what their title is and what they're involved with. Sometimes they announce their name, sometimes they don't. But I don't know if it's been published. If it has, maybe I just haven't received it. But have y'all put out the full listing of the people involved in the technical work group?
Not in a formal document. We will do that. So there's two pieces to the puzzle here. One is the members of the official members of the work group are a subset of the members of the dialogue itself.
Right.
And then we will also be inviting experts in when and as we can to perhaps present information and or provide input to the process. So we'll make sure that both of those sets of folks are known to everyone.
Okay, because I didn't know some of the government people that were on the last workshop. I didn't even have on my list, so that's why I was trying to get a final listing of it.
We will get that out, and we'll make sure that it's definitely posted on the website. And again, as fast as we're moving, let us know if things are unclear or if information hasn't been provided, and we'll make sure we get it out there.
Thank you.
Yep.
This is Jenny. Is it possible to do a listserv, like one email address for the entire group, and then maybe another email address for the technical work group? I'm getting emails from Christy and you, David, but I'm not getting all of the emails from other members of the group. They're being forwarded to me. So some people are using newer lists and some people are using older lists.
We hear you, and that is another challenge of having moved so fast, and we are trying to figure out if there's a better way to do this.
The way folks, in the meantime, can avoid problems like that is send it to Doug and I, and if you want something to go out to the whole group, and we'll make sure it goes out to the whole group, the most updated list. But we're working on that issue. let's see, Bob Fournette, I assume your hand's down. Ron Stuckey?
Yeah.
Yes, Colonel Stuckey. Just a quick point of clarification on that. The money I mentioned earlier, that's in the AOC. The AOC allows $24 million, but everybody needs to understand that the state has only received 80% of that, so we have available $19.3 million.
Okay. Can you say one more sentence on why the state only got 80%?
Because the AOC clearly identified they would only give us 80% of the $24 million up front. Right. And as we went through the process, if any additional money was required, we had to provide full justification for it.
Okay. Great. So on schedule, guys, pencil those in on your calendars. I would like to say that they're never going to change, but that's not true. This is a very fluid process, so we'll let you know and we'll keep posting it. If you have not yet done so, go to the website. Under EPA's website, you'll see Minden Dialogue under Minden, and we'll send out that link again for folks. And a lot of the information can be found there too, and we're making sure we're keeping that up to date also. We appreciate everybody's endurance. I mean, what you guys are attempting to do is phenomenal in terms of the timeline, but frankly, this is a phenomenal community, so I'm very impressed. With that, David, if we could take a few minutes to turn to any open public comments.
Great. So if everyone just pause a second. Tony, operator.
One more question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. I just wanted to bring this back up. So just because we just started talking about the AOC again, so I understand that the state has done the legal work that they need to do to be able to move forward after the dialogue committee has come up with solutions. I just wanted to know if we could get an update from EPA about the federal part of that legal equation, if there is amendment being prepared for the AOC, and whether we have any updates from the Army about whether they would be willing to sign the amendment to the AOC that needs to be done to allow for a remedy other than open burn, and where we are in that legal process.
This is Sam Coleman. Thank you for that question. We are continuing our work and dialogue with the Army and the Justice Department. I would characterize those conversations as ongoing and productive, and we will, of course, continue that work. And we feel like we're in a good position based on the outcome of the dialogue committee. But I could not characterize one way or the other because we actually don't have anything to present to them definitively at this point. So we're just maintaining open lines of communication, and as I said, we think that is very productive and positive from our perspective.
But so let me, operator, if we could go ahead and ask folks. We only have a few minutes left in the call. I know
David, I've got City of Shreveport up. I'm going to ignore the other Bob and Ron because I think they actually mean to have their hands down. But City of Shreveport, quickly. Hand up. Star one, you need to press. Go ahead.
We're starting to get calls from citizens asking about just how can they get medical help or whatever, and so I want to make sure that we're able to kind of accurately respond to them. How do you guys suggest, or is that the responsibility of this committee to suggest to citizens? Because now we're starting to get those calls about health concerns and things like that. We had a lady call in, said she has asthma and she feels like the burn, and I know I've told them there has been no burn. But we're starting to be inundated with those calls as well, and so it's just
way beyond the goal of this committee. One of the agencies, could you help us field some of those calls?
Do we need to direct them to DQ? or just tell them to go to the hospital, or tell them to get an attorney. We don't know. I don't want to ill-advise anybody.
See, there's a problem because during that explosion, we're trying to forget that, but a lot of things went out in the air then. And then after that, there was I can't remember how much it was like a 20,000-pound burn. And then there's been a third burn, which was 1,200 pounds. So, yeah, that area has had a lot of poison put on it. I'm not surprised that there's problems.
Oh, okay. Cool.
EPA and DEQ, I'm going to look to you guys to see if you can come up with some ideas, and maybe it's also turned into local health department too. We're not going to deal with that right here, though. I'm going to table that one. Mickey, you really got to go now? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we just need to. Yep. I would put everybody to DHH. That's entirely their thing.
Okay. So go ahead. We're going to take an extra few minutes and hear for the public. I realize that folks have to drop off. They have to drop off, but we're going to take a few minutes to hear if there's any public comment. Go ahead, David.
Great. So, Tony, if you'll go ahead and remind folks about how to ask a question. I know that we have one question in the queue, and so if you'll do that, and then we'll go ahead and take the first question.
Absolutely. At this time, I would like to remind everyone, in order to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. That is star 1 to ask a question. And your first question comes from the line of Devin Oberlander.
Go ahead.
Devin, your line is open.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm wondering, within EPA, is there a military munitions response program? Are there some rules that have already been established for the safe disposal of munitions constituents and energetic material? Is there a place to start in statute that already exists?
Yeah, this is Sam Coleman, and we probably could have follow-up if you could call over directly, but effectively there's the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, as well as CERCLA or Superfund, as was mentioned earlier in the call. I would say are two of the prevailing statutory responses, but within this entire area of dealing with munitions issues, we work very closely with the Department of Defense. There are a number of guiding statutory and policy documents, probably more than we can cover on this call in response to a question, but there's just a number of things that do govern how that work is monitored and assured that it's done safely.
To my understanding, and this comes from a lot of years of research, is that EPA has set forth some standards in cooperation with DoD that govern the disposal of munitions constituents, and specifically open burning and open detonation under RCRA Subpart X. And I say that because the facility that I live near does indeed open burn munitions constituents, and that comes under RCRA Subpart X from EPA. So why reinvent the wheel here? Isn't there, already some frame of reference for dealing with this?
I think that you accurately characterized some part of the regs and guidelines, and as I said, you could call and we could follow up more specifically.
Well, I'd be happy to do that. I just think you need to be transparent with the community that's most urgently, involved here. That all, if there's rules that apply, then why are we dancing around them?
But Devin, I think what they're saying is the rules are tossed to the side. And that has to do with the Superfund.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. The rules for open burning, open detonation is defined in RCRA Subpart X. state that if a safer alternative disposal method is found, and this came out in, I think it was 1987, for heaven's sake. So the EPA at that time was going to work on a safer method, and if one was found, that will be used. So if there's been some...
This is Christy. This is clearly an issue of great importance to a number of folks on this line, and we're going to put this on the agenda when we talk next time as a group, because we're all confused enough, and I want EPA to have a chance to kind of go back and figure out how they're going to help explain some of this to us and how RCRA and CERCLA interact on this, because this is a question that I've seen now for months, and we got to get some more clarity on this. What I know is we can't cover it right now.
And I agree with that, and I think the next time y'all come to the table, you ought to bring all the facts with you so that this can be expedited, because what you're considering there, burning 80,000 pounds a day, is a toxic assault that is not allowed under the law, and it's, that simple.
And I think the problem is, though, we've got a Department of Justice and other agencies all made a decision in terms of saying that they were going to do this. And obviously, open burn does happen in a lot of places in this country. This is Christy. I'm not speaking in favor of open burn. I'm just putting out facts that I do know it happens in various places. Perhaps it's illegal in all those places, but I'm suggesting we might have a lot of agencies that are going to speak up and say it's not. What we've got to do, though, is get some clarity as simply as possible from folks of how RCRA and CERCLA overlap here and what makes sense, because I think we're all confused on this.
Well, RCRA is a CERCLA program.
Great. So
okay, great. So, let's talk, Yeah.
Okay.
So,
other questions? And operator, how many?
We got time for one more question. So,
okay.
Operator, will you queue up the next question, please?
Your next question comes from the line of David Bennett. David, your line is open.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay. It's David Bennett. Colonel Stuckey was talking about the money. Now, he said we're getting $20 million, and we've never burned this much. What do we do if it's more than $20 million? Do we have somewhere to get extra money? Plus, there's very seldom do you see any contract with any of this stuff. A lot of times they'll go in there, and when that $20 million's gone, they say, well, this came up and this came up, and we hate to tell you, but in order to finish, we need another $10, $15 million. What do we do about that?
EPA, are you willing to repeat what you said yesterday on the finance into this?
Yes. That was Ron, or that was Sam made a comment yesterday they would do what they needed to. This is Dr. Bob Flanoy.
Yes.
So this is Sam Coleman. I think
EPA.
Yes, I'm with EPA. As Colonel Stuckey indicated earlier, there is a agreement that does include some financial conditions. I think that it will be important for everyone to get a copy of the very specific language in that agreement. I think that will be helpful. First of all, I don't want to try to go back and try and repeat every word, but just in the briefest form as I can, we believe that we will continue to work with our partners at the Defense Department and the Justice Department, as well as the state of Louisiana, to assure that there is sufficient funding to complete the project. And you really can't go any further than that at this point, simply because we have, nothing on the table to discuss with them. But we are in communication with all of our partners, and we recognize that is an iterative process, and we have to be able to move forward should that circumstance arise.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I'm 99% sure that it probably will arise. It'll be the first time that they don't do it, if it happens this time. But that's what I needed for an answer. That's fine.
Thank you, David.
All right, Operator, we have one more question, and it's from a reporter, and so let's go ahead and take that for the group real quick, and we'll wrap it up. Michelle?
and Press Herald. Christy, could you reiterate what the ARARS is and just kind of explain what it is?
Oh, EPA is probably better at it than I am, but ARAR stands for Applicable, Relevant, and Appropriate Requirements. So it's basically all the various state or federal regulations that might apply to something that's out there need to apply. So we shouldn't be considering any technologies that can't meet or be in compliance with the ARARs. EPA, you want to?
So in other words, it's like a list of requirements that have to be met before it could be considered. Like, I mean, for example, a technology to be considered.
EPA, you want to help me?
Well, yeah, Michelle, this is David. I'm happy to follow up with you with some information on ARARs.
Okay.
So we can do that offline.
Okay.
And I'm happy to get some more detail for you. Thank you for your question.
That would be great. Thank you.
Great. Happy to do it. All right, guys. So thank you so much. We've gone over just a little bit, and so we're going to wrap up the call today. Chrissy, any last comments for us as we conclude the call?
No, huge progress, guys. Really appreciate it. It's an amazing community and diversity on this phone, so thank you for all your endurance, guys. You're amazing.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
This concludes today's conference call. You may now disconnect your lines, presenters.